The morning had started in the kind of stillness that reminded me why I chose to live out here, far from suburban rules and nosy neighbors. The sun was just beginning to filter through the trees, throwing golden stripes across the porch where I sat with my dog stretched lazily at my feet. A mug of hot coffee warmed my hands, and the quiet hum of the forest felt like my own private symphony. That peace, however, shattered in an instant when a shiny black SUV came crunching up the gravel road that led only to my cabin. It wasn't unusual to see hikers or delivery drivers turn down the wrong path, but this vehicle slowed with purpose, rolling right up to the chain-link gate at the end of my drive. Even before the driver's window came down, I knew trouble was brewing. Behind the wheel was Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, a woman who thrived on stirring conflict where none existed. What caught my attention even more was the man beside her, a stranger clutching a clipboard, his brow furrowed as he scanned the property like he was evaluating it for sale. Karen pointed toward my cabin with the kind of entitlement only she could muster, her manicured finger slicing the air as though she were already dividing the land into plots. "This is the property I told you about. Perfect for the market," she announced loudly, her voice carrying across the open space as if she wanted me to hear every word. My stomach tightened instantly. That was my home, my retreat, the place I had built a life around, and I had never put it up for sale. The stranger, clearly a realtor by the look of his clipboard and neatly pressed shirt, leaned forward and asked hesitantly, "So, the owner is inside?" He spoke with the caution of someone who already sensed something was off. Karen didn't hesitate. She smirked, lips curling with that smug authority she wore like armor, and replied, "Don't worry about him. He won't be an issue. I run this neighborhood." I set my coffee down carefully, letting the mug clink against the wood of the porch railing, and rose to my feet. My dog, sensing my change in mood, barked sharply, hackles raised, but I lifted my hand in a steadying motion. No need to let the animal act for me. Instead, I walked slowly toward the gate, every step deliberate, refusing to let her theatrics rush me. Karen was already out of the SUV now, marching toward the chain-link barrier as though she owned the ground she walked on. She waved her phone in my direction like it was a badge of authority. "Unlock this gate. We have a showing scheduled." Her tone wasn't a request, it was a command, dripping with false confidence. My heart hammered against my ribs, not out of fear but out of raw disbelief at her audacity. She was trying to sell my home as if it were nothing more than a piece on her HOA chessboard. Instead of responding with anger, I crouched by the gate and twisted the key into the lock, not to open it, but to reinforce it. The heavy chain rattled as I looped it tighter, securing the barrier until it clanked with finality. Then I straightened up, carried a wooden board I had painted the night before, and with the hard crack of a hammer, nailed it into place against the fence. The letters were bold and undeniable: "Private property, not for sale." I stepped back, arms folded, letting the sign speak for itself. Karen's face turned red instantly, the kind of flush that spread from her neck to her cheeks when her imagined authority was challenged. She slammed both hands against the gate so hard it rattled. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "I've already told people this place is on the market. You're going to regret this." The man with the clipboard shuffled nervously, glancing between her and me. His voice came out low and uneasy. "Ma'am, are you sure this is even your listing? Because it doesn't look right." For the first time, a crack of doubt passed across his face, the realization dawning that he might have been pulled into something illegal. Karen ignored him, her glare locked on me like a predator denied its prey. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and declared with that fake authority she wielded like a weapon, "I'm part of the HOA. And if I say this cabin is for sale, then it's for sale." I took a step closer, resting my hands on the top bar of the gate, my voice dropping low and steady so only she could hear. "Then you're about to find out just how wrong you are." For a moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the trees and my dog's low growl vibrating through the air. Karen stood there at the gate, chest heaving, her manicured nails digging into the cold metal as if sheer willpower could bend the lock open. Her realtor companion lingered a few steps back, shifting from foot to foot, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. I reached calmly into my back pocket, pulled out my phone, and pressed the record button. The small red light blinked to life, and I held the device steady in front of me. "This woman," I said in a clear, deliberate voice, "is attempting to sell my home without my permission." The words weren't just for her, they were for anyone who would eventually see this footage. Evidence had a way of silencing liars. The effect was immediate. The realtor's jaw fell open as if I had just confirmed his worst suspicions. He stepped closer to the gate, eyes wide. "Wait, you're the owner?" His voice cracked with disbelief, like a man realizing too late he had been dragged into something that could ruin him. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I simply nodded and lifted a second object in my other hand, the deed to the cabin, sealed in a plastic sleeve to keep it safe from weather and wear. 15 years, I replied steadily. Bought it with cash. Paid in full. This land isn't tied to your HOA. Not a single contract, not a single lien. This place is mine, and mine alone. I let the paper catch the sunlight, the official stamp from the county clerk's office gleaming like a weapon. The realtor paled, his confidence draining like water through open fingers. He turned toward Karen, his voice shaking. "Ma'am, you told me you had authorization. You said the homeowner had signed off on the listing." He looked like he might be sick right there on the gravel. Karen, however, doubled down, her face contorting into the same mask of arrogance she always wore when she'd been caught in a lie. "It is my listing," she snapped. I meant to say it will be. He doesn't belong here. This land falls under HOA jurisdiction. We're within our rights to list it for sale. The lie rolled off her tongue like poison, but even she seemed to sense how thin it sounded now. I let out a short laugh, not the kind that carried joy, but the kind that echoed with disbelief and anger tightly leashed. "Funny thing," I said, lowering my phone just enough to make sure the camera caught the fire in my eyes. "This cabin was here long before your HOA even existed. Your little papers, your signatures, your inflated rules, none of them apply here." I stepped back from the gate, still holding the phone high, still recording. Karen's confidence faltered for the first time, her eyes darting toward the realtor, who now looked like he was on the verge of bolting. He muttered something about liability under his breath, then turned on his heel and walked quickly toward his SUV, his clipboard pressed tightly against his chest as though it might shield him from the fallout. His tires spit gravel as he tore down the road, leaving Karen stranded in the glow of her own arrogance. But Karen wasn't done, not yet. Her hands trembled as she dug her phone from her bag, her lips pressed into a hard line. She started dialing furiously, stabbing at the screen as though each button was a weapon in her arsenal. "You'll see," she shouted, her voice carrying across the fence. "I have authority here. I'll have the police here in minutes. They'll make you leave. You can't just sit on land that's supposed to raise our neighborhood's value." She spat the words like venom, her eyes bright with misplaced fury. I stayed calm, leaning one shoulder against the gate, letting her tantrum run its course. Because what she didn't know, what she could never have prepared for, was that the last time someone tried to sick the cops on me, the responding officer was an old army buddy. We'd shared foxholes, fought through fire, and trusted each other with our lives. And his number was still on speed dial in my phone. If Karen thought she could intimidate me by waving the law around like another HOA rulebook, she was about to learn the hard way that real authority doesn't bow to fraud. The gravel road had always been a picture of seclusion, lined with tall pines and thick underbrush, a natural barrier that kept the world out. But that morning, it roared with the sound of engines. Within 15 minutes of Karen's frantic call, 2 patrol cars came grinding up the road, their red and blue lights strobing against the tree trunks, casting jagged shadows across my cabin. My dog barked furiously, pacing the porch as the cruisers stopped at the gate. Karen straightened instantly, her entire demeanor shifting. Gone was the rattled woman caught in a lie. In her place stood a queen awaiting her guards, chin lifted, hand waving like she was directing her personal cavalry. "Officers, over here!" she barked, pointing toward me as if I was some criminal cornered on my own land. "This man is trespassing on HOA property and refusing to leave. I want him arrested immediately." The 2 officers stepped out, their boots crunching gravel as they approached. Both scanned the scene quickly, the locked gate, Karen's flushed face, my calm stance just beyond the fence. One raised an eyebrow. "Trespassing," he muttered, clearly skeptical. "Ma'am, he's standing on the porch of that house." Karen's voice grew shrill as she tried to hold her ground. "Yes, but he's not supposed to be here. This property is under HOA authority, and I've already listed it for sale." He's lying about ownership." She shoved her phone toward them, displaying what looked like hastily forged documents, the digital ink still fresh with desperation. I could see the officers exchange a glance, the kind of silent communication that spoke volumes. They weren't buying it. I didn't move right away. Instead, I let her words hang in the air, heavy with entitlement, before stepping forward and holding up my own folder. "Funny thing, officers," I said, my voice calm but edged with steel, "I've got a different story to tell." I passed the deed through the bars of the gate, the official seal shining in the morning light. "This property has been mine for 15 years. Paid for in cash. No mortgage, no HOA contracts, no obligations to anyone but myself. Every inch of this land is free and clear." The taller officer took the papers, flipping through them carefully. His jaw tightened as he recognized the stamps, the county clerk's signature, the legitimacy of documents that couldn't be faked with a printer and some arrogance. He looked up at Karen, his eyes sharp now. "Ma'am, these records are pulled from the county clerk. They're legitimate. Do you have anything legal that says otherwise?" Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. She stuttered, her hands flailing as if grasping for invisible excuses. He must have faked those papers. He's lying." The second officer chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "Ma'am, you just accused the county clerk's office of fraud. That's a new one." The smirk on his face told me he wasn't amused. It told me he'd already pegged her as the problem. Karen's cheeks burned crimson, but she pushed forward, desperation dripping from every syllable. "Fine. If you won't arrest him, then I'll press charges for harassment. He threatened me. He scared me." She tried to twist the narrative, but I was already a step ahead. I lifted my phone again and tapped the screen. The recording from earlier echoed across the clearing, Karen's own voice spilling out for all to hear. "If I say this cabin is for sale, it's for sale." The officers froze, their attention snapping back to her. One smirked, the other crossed his arms. "You want to rethink that statement, ma'am?" the taller one asked, his tone edged with warning. Karen's confidence cracked like glass under a hammer. She reached forward as if to snatch my phone, but the officer held up his hand to stop her. "Stay right there. We're going to need to see some ID." Her shoulders stiffened, but she had no choice. With a curse under her breath, she fished her wallet from her purse and handed it over. The taller cop radioed in her information, his voice calm, almost bored. A few minutes later, the reply came crackling back through the static. Prior complaints of fraud and harassment filed in neighboring counties. The air shifted instantly, heavy with implication. The taller officer's jaw set hard, and he turned back toward Karen. "So, this isn't your first time pulling something like this?" Her face drained of color. "Those complaints were lies. Misunderstandings. I was only trying to help the neighborhood." I crossed my arms, leaning casually against the gate as I delivered the final blow. "By selling houses that don't belong to you?" The words landed like a hammer. Karen's mask shattered, and for the first time that morning, fear flickered in her eyes. She wasn't the queen anymore. She was a con caught in the act, and the law was standing on my side of the gate. Just when I thought the chaos might be winding down, the sound of tires crunching on gravel echoed again through the trees. Another SUV crept up the drive, this one sleek and dark, tinted windows hiding the passengers inside. The patrol officers stiffened, shifting their stance as three people stepped out. 2 men and 1 woman, all dressed in sharp business suits that looked wildly out of place against the backdrop of pine needles and mud. These weren't neighbors dropping by for a visit. These were HOA board members, summoned to the battlefield Karen had created. They moved with irritation rather than urgency, like they had been dragged out of comfortable offices to deal with an inconvenient mess. Karen's face lit up the second she saw them, her voice rising to a screech from the back seat of the patrol car where she sat restrained. "Finally! Tell these officers I had every right. We were selling this dump for the good of the neighborhood." The three froze mid-step when their eyes caught the sight of my phone, still in my hand, the red recording light glowing like a warning beacon. The woman muttered under her breath, "She actually did it." The shorter man rubbed his forehead, already exasperated. "We told her not to go this far." Their reactions weren't those of allies swooping in to defend a colleague. They were the looks of accomplices watching their scheme collapse in broad daylight. The taller officer picked up on it immediately, his gaze narrowing. "So," he said slowly, "you did know about this scheme." His voice wasn't accusatory yet, but the implication hung heavy. The board members exchanged nervous glances, eyes darting anywhere but toward me. The silence spoke louder than words. That was my cue. I stepped forward until I was right at the gate, lifting the phone higher so the camera could frame the whole scene. Karen shouting in the back seat, the officers standing guard, and the board members caught like deer in headlights. "Don't bother denying it," I said evenly. "You're all on tape now. Every word, every lie, every scheme you thought you could run behind closed doors. I've been recording since the moment she rolled up to my gate." My voice carried, not with anger, but with conviction, the kind of steady weight that only the truth can hold. The woman's eyes snapped to me, cold and sharp. "You can't release that footage," she hissed. "It'll ruin the HOA's reputation." I smiled, a slow, deliberate expression that made it clear I wasn't bluffing. "Exactly the point." Karen lost it then. From the patrol car, she shrieked and thrashed against the seatbelt restraining her, her voice carrying across the clearing. "You cowards! You said you'd back me up. You said we'd split the money." The words flew out before she could stop herself, raw panic tearing away the last shred of composure she had clung to. The board members turned as pale as paper, their carefully curated masks slipping all at once. They had relied on Karen's arrogance to carry out their dirty work, never expecting she would crumble and expose them this easily. But there it was, her voice, her confession, caught on my phone for the world to hear. The taller officer didn't even hesitate. He turned back to the board members, his tone hardening like steel. "Ma'am, gentlemen, we're going to need you to stay right here." His hand hovered near his radio, ready to call for backup if necessary. The board members stammered excuses, but none of them landed. Their words tangled in the air, brittle and weak, because the truth had already burned through their lies. I watched them, calm and steady, arms folded as I let the weight of the moment settle over the clearing. For the first time since Karen's SUV had rolled up my drive, the balance of power had shifted completely. They weren't in control anymore. Not the Queen in the back seat, not the board in their suits, not the HOA with its endless rules. This was my land, my home, and the truth was on my side. The silence that followed Karen's outburst was deafening. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath, the whisper of wind through the pines pausing as if nature itself waited for the final blow to fall. The officers didn't waste time. The taller one called for backup, his voice clipped and decisive, while the shorter officer moved to separate the board members, guiding them a few paces apart as though he expected fists or more lies to fly. Karen still writhed in the back of the patrol car, her words now devolved into incoherent screams of betrayal. "You promised me. You said this would work," she wailed, her face pressed against the glass like a trapped animal. The board members stood rigid, their arrogance crumbling as they realized the gravity of what was happening. This wasn't a misunderstanding to smooth over at a meeting or a fine to collect with threats of litigation. This was fraud, conspiracy, and exposure, and it was happening in real time, right in front of the homeowner they had underestimated. When the backup unit arrived, the mood shifted from tense to final. The new officers were efficient, almost clinical, as they took statements, logged evidence, and began handcuffing Karen and two of the board members on charges that would take weeks, maybe months, to unravel in court. The third board member, the one who had muttered, "She actually did it," was left standing with his head in his hands, spared cuffs for the moment but drowning in guilt all the same. "I told them not to push it this far," he whispered, almost to himself. "It was supposed to be about order, about property values. Not this." His words fell flat against the weight of the truth. Whatever justifications they had once clung to had dissolved into nothing. The HOA's mask of authority had been ripped away, revealing nothing but greed and fear underneath. As Karen was loaded into the second cruiser, her shrieks turned shrill, cutting across the clearing like a blade. "You think you've won?" she spat at me, her eyes wild with rage. "People like you never win against the HOA. We're everywhere. We run everything." The officer shut the door before she could finish, her words muffled into silence as the car rolled slowly down the drive, lights still flashing between the trees. For the first time in weeks, my land felt like mine again. The weight that had pressed on me since the day I found Karen inside my cabin lifted, replaced with something cleaner, sharper, vindication. I wasn't just a man standing against a neighbor's arrogance anymore. I had pulled back the curtain and exposed the machine behind her. The remaining officers stayed long enough to finalize reports and assure me I'd hear from the county prosecutor soon. "You've got nothing to worry about," the taller one said, shaking my hand firmly before he left. "You did everything right, kept calm, documented everything, and never stooped to their level. That recording saved you a world of trouble." His words echoed in my chest as the cruisers rolled away, their taillights fading into the darkening woods. For the first time all day, the clearing was quiet again. No more engines, no more shouting, no more intrusions. Just the soft creak of the cabin's porch steps beneath me as I finally sat down, staring out at the lake beyond. The water shimmered under the setting sun, a reflection of calm I hadn't felt in months. Later, as I stood on the dock with my dog at my side, I let the cool breeze off the lake wash over me. This place had always been more than just land or timber. It was freedom, a sanctuary from the noise of the world. And that day, I had defended it not with fists or rage, but with truth, patience, and the law itself. The HOA had tried to twist that law into a weapon against me, but in the end, it turned back on them. Karen was gone. The board was fractured. And my cabin still stood, stronger than their schemes, older than their rules, and mine in every way that mattered.